Sandra Bullock steps out of her car in front of Lawn Door, one of the fanciest restaurants in Los Angeles. Even though she is wearing simple clothes, a black sweater and jeans, she looks elegant. But her eyes are not focused on the beautiful lights or the expensive cars parked outside. Instead, Sandra notices something that other people ignore. Through the restaurant's giant windows, past the sparkling chandeliers and fancy dishes, she sees a young girl standing outside. The girl looks about 12 years old, wearing an old blue jacket that is too big for her. Her clothes are worn out, her hair is neatly combed but slightly messy, and she looks thin. But what catches Sandra's attention the most is the way the girl stares at the food inside. Her eyes follow each plate that is carried to the tables, her face filled with sadness and longing. Sandra's heart tightens. The girl is clearly hungry. Without making a big deal about it, Sandra quietly waves for a waiter and asks him to prepare an extra meal. But before she can finish speaking, the head waiter, Victor, steps forward. Victor is a tall man in a perfectly pressed black suit. His hair is slicked back and he always walks with confidence. He has worked at Lawn Door for 15 years and takes pride in keeping the restaurant elegant and exclusive. His voice is smooth but cold. "Madam," Victor says, glancing at the girl outside with clear disapproval. "We do not serve that kind here. Maybe you could direct her to a more suitable place." Sandra's eyes narrow slightly. She's hungry. That's all that matters. Victor doesn't like this. Lawn Door is a place for the rich and powerful, and he believes it should stay that way. What happens next will not only change the young girl's life forever but will also teach everyone in the restaurant an unforgettable lesson about kindness. Lawn Door isn't just any restaurant. It's a place where movie stars, business leaders, and wealthy people come to eat. The outside of the restaurant is golden, shining under the bright California sun. It sits on Rodeo Drive, a street famous for expensive shops and celebrities. Through the giant windows, people can see beautiful chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The tables are covered in white tablecloths, and a soft melody plays from a grand piano in the corner. The air smells of delicious food, truffle risotto, roasted salmon, and freshly baked bread. Victor, the head waiter, makes sure everything runs perfectly. He watches over the restaurant like a king protecting his castle. Every evening, Victor moves around the room like a conductor leading an orchestra. His smile looks friendly, but his mind is sharp. He quickly judges each guest based on how they dress, how they act, and how much money they seem to have. Remember, Victor always tells new waiters, we are not just serving food. We are preserving an experience. Each table is placed carefully so that rich and famous guests can eat without being disturbed. The wine collection includes bottles so expensive that some cost more than an average person's monthly salary. The menu is full of fancy dishes that only wealthy guests can afford. Tonight, the restaurant is as elegant as always. Silverware clinks softly, guests whisper in quiet voices, and the smell of expensive food fills the air. Everything is just as Victor likes it, until Sandra Bullock arrives and changes everything. Sandra sits at her table, but she keeps looking out the window. The young girl outside presses her hand against the glass, watching the food being served inside. She quickly pulls her hand away when she notices Sandra watching. Sandra sees the way the girl shrinks back whenever a well-dressed guest walks by. She tries to make herself invisible as if she is afraid of being noticed. Sandra's heart aches. Victor walks up to Sandra's table with his usual polite smile. He holds a silver tray perfectly balanced in one hand. "Good evening, Miss Bullock," he says smoothly. "Our chef has prepared an excellent truffle risotto tonight. Would you like to hear our specials?" But Sandra isn't listening. Her eyes are still on the girl outside. Victor notices this and quickly moves to block her view, standing tall in front of the window. Sandra looks up at him. "I'd like to order 2 meals," she says. "One for me and one to go." She glances at the window again, making it clear that the second meal is for the girl outside. Victor stiffens. His fingers grip the tray a little harder. "Miss Bullock," he whispers, lowering his voice, "I wouldn't recommend that. We have a reputation to maintain. Perhaps you could donate food somewhere more appropriate?" Sandra's gentle face turns serious. Her voice remains calm, but there is a firmness in her tone. The girl is hungry. That's all that matters. She picks up the menu and points to a few dishes. "I'll have the salmon. And for her, the pasta, a bowl of hot soup, and a slice of chocolate cake." Victor's jaw tightens. A small muscle twitches in his cheek. "Miss Bullock, with all due respect, we cannot have people thinking that Lawn Door is a..." He pauses, choosing his words carefully. "Soup kitchen. It would disturb our other guests." Around the restaurant, people start to notice the quiet argument between Sandra and Victor. At a nearby table, A woman wearing a diamond bracelet whispers to her husband. The bracelet sparkles under the chandelier light. An older gentleman with silver hair frowns at Victor, looking displeased. A group of young businessmen pretend not to listen, but they are clearly paying attention. Sandra leans back in her chair. Her eyes stay locked on Victor's face. I'm not asking for permission, she says. I'm placing an order. I'm a paying customer. Her voice has just enough sharpness to make Victor hesitate. He opens his mouth to argue, but she doesn't let him. And I expect both meals to be made with the same care as every other dish served here. Victor takes a slow, deep breath. His nostrils flare slightly. He is not happy, but he cannot refuse a paying customer. As you wish, Miss Bullock, he finally says. But I must remind you that we have strict rules about. He glances toward the window again. Outside food service. Sandra just nods, making it clear she will not back down. As Victor walks away, his usual graceful steps are now stiff with frustration. Sandra notices movement at the entrance. A man in a black jacket walks in quietly and sits at the bar. He doesn't seem like one of the restaurant's usual customers, but something about him feels familiar. Sandra looks back at the window. The young girl is still standing outside. At the kitchen entrance, Victor is whispering to the other waiters, looking frustrated. He is clearly upset about having to serve a meal for the girl outside. But the night is far from over. What happens next will be an unforgettable lesson in kindness. And no one, not even Victor, is prepared for what is coming. The bartender picks up a glass of water and drinks it slowly, his eyes focused on what is happening around him. He notices a man sitting at the bar and does a double take, recognizing him instantly. But instead of saying anything, he keeps quiet. The man at the bar gives him a small, subtle gesture, telling him to stay silent. Outside, Sandra looks up at the darkening sky and frowns. She turns back to Victor, the waiter, and asks, "How long will the other meal take?" There is worry in her voice, and she glances toward the window. Victor tightens his lips into a thin line and replies in a cold tone, "Our kitchen is very busy serving our usual customers, Miss Bullock. Perhaps the young girl outside should find food somewhere else." His voice sounds polite, but there is no kindness in it. There's a fast food place a few blocks away. That should be more suitable. Sandra does not touch her food. She gently pushes the plate aside and looks straight at Victor. "I'll wait until both meals are ready," she says firmly. "And I want to speak to the manager." Victor's face twitches for just a moment, a flash of irritation crossing his features. He quickly regains control and gives a smooth reply. "Miss Bullock, I am fully authorized to handle all situations here, including those involving unwanted guests." The air in the restaurant changes. The tension can be felt by everyone in the room. A young couple sitting at a nearby table whispers, looking uneasy. An older woman, wearing sparkling jewelry, sits tall and nods in agreement with Victor. She speaks in a loud, clear voice, making sure others can hear. "Standards must be maintained," she says. "Otherwise, where would it end?" Encouraged by her words, Victor stands a little straighter, now feeling even more confident in his actions. When another server tries to bring out the second meal, Victor moves quickly, stepping in front of them. "New policy," he announces loudly, making sure the entire restaurant hears him. "All takeout orders must now be approved by management." The young server stops, looking uncertain. They glance between Victor and Sandra, unsure of what to do next. The restaurant is quiet and everyone waits to see what will happen. At the bar, Keanu Reeves finishes his glass of water and sets it down. His eyes, sharp and serious, stay locked on Victor. He has seen enough. Standing slowly, he adjusts his jacket and prepares to step forward. But before he can, things take a turn for the worse. Sandra gets up from her seat. She is still calm, but there is strength in her voice. "I'd like my check, please," she says. "For both meals, whether you have prepared them or not." Victor is quick to react. Almost too quickly, he pulls out the bill and presents it to her with an exaggerated flourish, like a magician performing a trick. "Of course, Miss Bullock," he says, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "Though I should remind you that we have a strict no-refund policy for unfinished meals." Through the window, Sandra sees the little girl start to walk away. Her shoulders are slumped and her head is low. It is clear that she has lost hope. Sandra makes a decision. Without another word, she begins walking toward the kitchen, determined to get the food herself. Victor sees this and moves quickly to block her path. His professional act drops completely and his voice is now firm. "Miss Bullock, please return to your table. We wouldn't want to cause a scene." A new voice speaks up, calm but strong. "I believe the scene has already been caused." Every head in the restaurant turns toward the speaker. Keanu Reeves has stepped forward. His simple clothes contrast sharply with the restaurant's elegant setting, but his presence is powerful. Victor's face turns pale as he realizes who is standing in front of him. Keanu smiles warmly at Sandra. "Hello, Sandra," he says. "Mind if I help make sure everyone gets fed tonight?" Victor opens and closes his mouth, trying to find words. "Mr. Reeves, I didn't know you were involved. We have certain standards." Keanu holds up a hand, stopping him. "Standards?" He repeats softly. "Let's talk about standards." Sandra here showed the highest standard of all, kindness. At that moment, the young server who had been stopped earlier reappears. She is carrying the second meal in a takeout container. Without asking Victor for permission, she walks straight to Sandra and hands it to her. "I added extra bread and a bottle of water," she whispers with a nervous but determined smile. Sandra's face softens. "Thank you." Then she turns to Keanu. "Would you like to join me?" Together, they walk toward the restaurant's entrance. Victor does nothing to stop them this time. They call out to the little girl, who turns back, looking unsure. "Emma," she says quietly when they ask her name. As she sits at the table with Sandra and Keanu, she explains, "I live with my grandma, but she lost her job. We're trying to get by." She takes her first bite of the warm pasta, and her eyes well up with tears. Keanu turns to the room and speaks so everyone can hear. "This is what food is about," he says. "Not about money. Not about who belongs where. Food should bring people together, not push them apart." Victor watches as the restaurant changes before his eyes. Other customers, moved by what has happened, start asking their servers to pack extra meals for those in need. An elderly man who had earlier frowned in disapproval now walks to Emma's table. He hands Sandra a business card. "I own a company," he says. "Tell your grandmother to call me. I might be able to help." Keanu turns to Victor, who is standing awkwardly, expecting to be fired. But instead, Keanu says, "Tomorrow we're starting something new here. Every night, 2 tables will be reserved for people who can't afford a meal. They will be treated with the same respect and kindness as anyone else. Would you like to be part of that?" Victor looks at Emma, then at Sandra and Keanu's kind faces. Slowly he nods. "Yes," he says softly. "Yes, I would." 3 months later, the restaurant has transformed. It is still beautiful and elegant, but now it is known for something far more important than being exclusive. Emma's grandmother now has a job at the restaurant, working in the new afternoon tea service. Victor personally manages the evening community table program, treating every guest with kindness and respect. Sandra and Keanu visit often. Sometimes they come together, sometimes separately, but they always take time to sit with the special guests at the community tables. The restaurant has become a place where kindness and luxury go hand in hand. It proves that true class isn't about money, it's about how we treat each other. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories filled with adventure, mystery, and excitement. Your support means the world, and it helps keep these stories coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.